what were some of the other sort of defining moments and insights and realizations that made you realize that this isn't productive?
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose there's quite a lot, but I suppose the most important one, and we've covered a lot of this already, is the operation in Nottinghamshire. Now, in Nottingham, there was a lot of pressure on me to find out information about the certain gangs because there was warfare going on between this gang called the Bestwood Cartel, run by Colin Gunn, and just about everybody else. And there were shootings happening all the time. It was in the national press and even the national news at the time. Nowadays, people have become numb to it and it doesn't even reach the newspapers. But then it was a big deal back in about 2003. So I managed to get introduced to this particular lieutenant of this gangster. And I remember when I was introduced to him, I went to meet him, and he turned up in a car with his son, with 12-year-old son. We're okay for time?
Yeah, we're okay. Just checking.
With his 12-year-old son. And his 12-year-old son was wearing the same tracksuit, the same trainers, the same shaved head, the same gold necklace. He was like a mini me. And this gangster had obviously brought his son along to teach him the ropes, and he was showing off a bit to his son. So he opened the car door and he put a knife into my groin, which is unsettling.
Yeah.
Really unsettling.
Never had that happen to me, but I can imagine.
I wouldn't recommend it.
Not going to.
And he interrogated me while he had this knife pressed into my groin. But eventually he sold me the drugs and he went. So that was a stressful day. And then I had early morning start the next morning, and we had a briefing. But 2 of my team had gone off sick, so there was 2 new cops brought in that I'd not met before. I didn't like that to start with. I didn't want my team shaken up. That's unsettling. Met the first one, shook his hand. I had no problem with him. The second one, I shook his hand and the hairs just stuck up on the back of my neck. There was something completely wrong about this guy, instinctively. Now, when you've been working undercover for 4.5 months at that point, your senses are really fine-tuned. You're very, very hypersensitive to nuances of body language. And I knew this guy wasn't right. I knew it. So I said to the guy running the operation, I said, look, boss, I can't have this guy. I'm not having this guy in the team. I'm not going out there. And he was great. He said, fine, we'll just exclude them both. They've just been told to come here. They know nothing about the job. They've not been briefed. We'll just get rid of them. They can park up at the edge of town. I was reassured. I put it out of my mind. A year later, the Bestwood Cartel was brought down by a brilliant operation by Nottinghamshire Constabulary. And at that point, it was found that police officer that I'd taken exception to was an employee of Colin Gunn. He was part of the gang. But he was paid to join the police. He was paid to join. And by the time I'd met him, he'd been in the police for 7 years. He was paid £2,000 a month on top of his police wages, plus bonuses for good information. Now, he was caught by luck, really. And in the debrief for that, senior cops said to me, look, Woodsy, we know this happens. Of course we know this happens. With this much money involved, how can it not happen? Now, I know we've already discussed corruption earlier on, but I just wanted to emphasise that example, one of my examples where I've come across corruption, because it's important to note how sophisticated this corruption is and the fact that they even use sleeper corrupt cops to corrupt other corrupt cops, to corrupt cops by finding something against them, to blackmail them, to influence them, so that the established person is always safe and they are merely used to turn other ones. It's really sophisticated how this happens around the world, really sophisticated. And we cannot defend against it in the current drug policy regime. I know I've said that already, but forgive me for emphasising the importance of that.
No, of course.